So what strategy should they use to start adding the cognitive capabilities to their ECM programs?
I think there's a few different areas to start. This chart is something that published last year when we were trying to understand, okay, so in this case of file analytics, many of the vendors of which do have machine learning capabilities built in, is where do you kind of decide where to start? And so of some of the more common use cases that I talk to customers about, trying to map them in terms of, well, how complex is the use case and how relevant are they in terms of delivering like tangible business value, and kind of see it on a spectrum from reactive to proactive. The more reactive, in terms of just being very tactical, is something like the file share cleanup, using some of the analytics and algorithms to do things like duplicate detection, or being able to understand, okay, this is a rendition of the Word document in another format. Then we get into a little bit more sophistication around things like, well, sensitive data detection, go out and crawl and process and identify what might be containing things like PII or other kinds of confidential text or data strings. And then even getting into some of the more intelligent use cases. Some of the organizations I've spoken to are going through some substantial business reorganizations. And so they want to be able to use some of these tools to intelligently and accurately parse through, again, these terabytes of documents. Perhaps they're going to spin off a line of business as part of a M&A kind of activity, and being able to find all the documents relevant to the sister company that's now going to be independent. So how do I figure out what belongs to whom? So some really interesting use cases there. From an adoption perspective, when do you expect to adopt some of these more cutting edge areas? And for things like for the file analytics, for things like intelligent migrations, we do see that there's interest in doing that among many firms, in the next year or so. When we get into things like AI, machine learning, other kind of cognitive services, this is where we still see it's another 1 to 2 years out before we start to get really meaningful pilots or phase 1 kind of adoption inside the content management practice team. And I think what's going to be important as we move into that adoption is that, we're not just looking at reinventing the wheel. We're not just repaving the existing path. Is that we are thinking differently, and we're taking a little bit more of an outside-in perspective. Don't just bolt on or automate existing processes, but rethinking things from scratch. Don't just look at efficiency and cost saving in terms of the outcomes and expectations, but can you actually start to use data and get more nimble and agile? Use some of that information locked up in your documents to make better, more informed decisions. Certainly speed. Organizations that are serious about their own transformation initiatives are looking to become much more agile and nimble in terms of making innovations, testing and innovating, and having the data, having the information from those previously relatively unmanaged locations is certainly could be a very valuable input to that. And of course, in terms of like the value proposition, it's not just about better products or better processes, but it's also enriching kind of that ecosystem with you and your customers, you and your partners, you and the employee experience as well. So for those organizations that are working to bring analytics and some of these automated approaches into their content management systems, again, 48% really aren't doing anything effectively, but those that are, again, are still kind of tapping some of the low-hanging fruit here in terms of some of the nuts and bolts, not necessarily getting very sophisticated, but are looking to automate the categorization of their documents, or are looking to extract data from that content using some kind of data extraction or even optical character recognition types of tools.
This is kind of a good opportunity, too, to kind of say to, let's say, 48% of the organizations out there or people out there responsible for this, it's a little bit of shame on you. As we wade in with our machine learning models to people's data, we identify their documents, we identify entities in the documents, and we provide a lot of value, but it builds on itself. So the machine learning gets better and better and better the more data that it consumes. So if you don't start it right now, you're actually going to be miles behind your competitors who are starting it right now. And that's what, to me, what this slide really calls out, is that it's almost 50% of the people out there are going to be way behind just because the machine learning, it grows at such a pace and its understanding grows at such a pace.